Welcome back to Studio Chatter. The pandemic has certainly had a severe effect on the working world. Let's get the inside help from Taylor Nelson, who is the Corporate Recruiting and Internship Manager for Nexio HR. Thanks for being here with us, Taylor.
Yeah, of course.
Hi,
My wife's been on a couple of times, so I couldn't let her be the only famous one in the house.
So it's your turn, right?
Yeah,
His
my turn
mother-in-law
now.
just makes him do the craziest
Yeah,
things.
announce a football game. So, but I'm happy to be here. It's fun talking about
for
stuff.
people not connecting that.
Yeah.
This is my cute son-in-law, but
Yeah.
son. He's awesome. And he's got mad skills about everything. Like anytime I have like a technical question or how would you do this, he's creating Excel sheets. He's good at what he does. So I'm excited to hear his take on it.
I think this is very
Yeah.
timely, and I think there are people in certain situations right now that are either unemployed or looking for work, and I know I've had a lot of questions for people that are searching for work right now, even about the whole interview process.
Yeah.
Like how that's going on through Zoom, or there's no contact, or how do you dress for that, or how to represent yourself.
Yeah.
So first of all, let's just start at point one with the
You
new
are-
resume. What is the new resume?
Yeah.
What does that look like or not look like?
That's a good question. Honestly, like LinkedIn is probably the new resume.
Okay.
I tell people, like even my wife, like she's a nurse and she even feels like she doesn't need a LinkedIn, but there are so many just professional type people who are on LinkedIn who are always looking. I think the past 2 jobs that I've had have come from LinkedIn, whether it's
Really?
Interesting.
knowing someone at the company where they can put a good word in for you, or just kind of networking, and like something I do on the side is like a little podcast. It's not anything too crazy, but I've interviewed people from like Franklin Covey up in Salt Lake, and they found me through LinkedIn. So I would say LinkedIn is the new resume, and even if you're in a position that's not like professional, right? Like it's still something that you can have to build out your network, and it's almost like social media. It's not as like picture focused as Instagram or information focused as Facebook, but it's more, here's my resume, or here's this podcast that I'm doing, or here's something that our company is doing. So I think it's a good way to get your professional network going. And I was listening to this podcast a little bit ago, and they said that your network equals kind of your net worth. And so the more connections you have on there, I think the better it is. Because as a talent acquisition professional, I manage a team of 5 or 6 different people.
Okay.
And every time someone applies, if they have a resume, great, but I'll almost always look them up on LinkedIn as well.
Okay.
And
To see how others respond to
Right.
them, or what other skills maybe that
what
they
other
have,
skills,
or
and like
connections.
LinkedIn, yeah, it allows you to put on like certifications, like if you're certified in like Salesforce, or if you're certified with like digital marketing tools. I used to work at a digital marketing place, so that was something that I would always look at. You can give people recommendations, so it's almost like a live action.
I
Here's
was
my
just going to
reference,
say that,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, because
live feed of their life a little bit.
and a lot of time, like on resumes, it's like check your references, and then you have to call 4 people, and they're always going to say the best
They're
stuff
great.
about people.
Yeah.
But you can give recommendations, you can get them from other people, and so it's almost like just a live view of who somebody is, in addition to their resume. So I would say it's good to have a resume, but LinkedIn is probably the way of the future for sure.
So I've also heard that the number of contacts that you have on LinkedIn, I mean, how true is that? So if you have 500 or more or less, or,
I feel like it's kind of gray area. Like there's a lot of people, like I think on LinkedIn I have like 500 plus connections, but I probably don't know everybody.
Okay.
But again, like it's through the networking that someone that you knows someone that they know, and
Yeah.
then you're getting a job that way.
Okay.
Like for example, when I got hired at the last company that I worked for, I knew somebody who had previously worked with the president of that company. So it was kind of an indirect connection, but I knew him, I had played like football with him once, and so he put a good word in for me, and I got the job offer the next
Wow.
day. So I
So
think
it
it's
is
just
who you know, and those
Yeah.
connections, and being able to
Right.
utilize it in a good platform.
Yeah, and I think you have to just be conscious of who you're connecting with. And I think one thing that I tell like my team members or people who are interviewing with me is like connect with people who you wants to, if you want to be in a position like that. Like I would connect with people who are HR directors or HR managers or talent acquisition, like people that I want to become, or companies that I want to work for. Like I would connect with those people so I can see what content they're posting. I can kind of digest what they're going through on the professional day-to-day stuff, and then it helps me kind of align myself with who they are. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah, that does.
So would you be a good person to contact, like if I did not have LinkedIn and I did not know anything about it, how would I move forward doing that?
Yeah, so I mean, they have the website, like linkedin.com, you can
Okay.
go through that, and it really kind of builds out like a resume for you. And it's unique because it gives you like your own personal like URL. And so a lot of times like I'll put that link on my on my resume, on my physical copy of my resume. So that way companies can go through that. People will put on their business cards. And people can attach it to like your email signature. If you know, people, my wife makes fun of me because I have a signature on my email, but you know, it's even like just someone like my wife, for example, who's a nurse, or like my mom who teaches school. Like it's important, I think, to have a LinkedIn, even if you feel like you're never going to use it.
Okay.
So I think, you know, the website's a great place to start and kind of going through that.
So Studio Chatter, ladies, we need a link.
I started one during the pandemic at Utah Valley Magazine. We were encouraged to
go.
do it, and
Yeah.
I've just avoided it because I just think it's one
One
more
more thing.
thing
Yep.
that I've chosen not to do. But just after listening to you,
Yeah.
I'm thinking,
And
I
it
need
can
to
be a
do
lot
it.
to keep up on, but like you said, like on a resume, I feel like if you were applying for a job, like I wouldn't get the full effect of what this is or what Utah Valley Magazine
Right.
is. And so on LinkedIn, you can post links to Studio Chatter, or you could post links to the magazine, right? And so I can actively go and look at who Stacy Beck is as a professional, rather than just assuming who you are on a piece of
Okay.
paper.
It really makes me realize the wave of the future with job hiring is the technology, the connections.
Yeah, and people reach out to me all the time for like resume tips. I've helped a handful of people, and I think I'm just weird. I kind of just enjoy doing that stuff and just
That's
scouring through
great.
He's a
resumes.
true
So,
HR guy.
so yeah, but I enjoy it, and I like just kind of. But I've reached out to 4 or 5 people who need help, and,
Yeah.
and I think LinkedIn is just a great way to connect with people who you might not otherwise have known.
So how have you seen COVID affect the workplace?
Yeah, I think especially at Nexio, so we're a talent acquisition agency, so we partner with other companies. We facilitate a lot of the HR functions, whether companies have an HR department or maybe they're a startup and they don't have any HR presence. So we would go in and help with things like payroll or compliance or just recruiting and hiring. And so a lot of like with the COVID stuff is people will come to us, and I tell people a lot of times is like staffing companies or talent acquisition companies can be the job that you want versus the job that you need. And I think COVID threw everyone for a little bit of a loop, right? If you're out of work, if you're unemployed or furloughed, like a staffing organization like Nexio is the job that you probably don't want, but the job that you need to
Right.
keep bringing in some sort of an income, expand your skill set a little bit. And so I think companies would rely on Nexio or other staffing companies more in times like this, and staffing companies usually see an increase in productivity just because companies want to increase their workforce, but they don't want to have the burden of employee costs. So that's kind of how I've seen it. We've been super busy. Our team just in Lehigh, we have like 75 open positions right now. We have positions here in Utah. We have positions in California and Texas and
Wow.
Chicago and Florida. So we're all over the place hiring for entry level like admin jobs, but also very high level like VP positions. So,
Wow.
so staffing companies are a really great resource if you're out of work, if you've been furloughed, if you want to just try something new and get
Yeah.
some new skills. It's not as it's not as insecure of a job as some people would think.
Okay.
Yeah.
How difficult is it to place people in a job working from home and then kind of follow up to make sure that they're following
Yeah.
through
Yeah, that's-
on what they have said either on that remote interview or in their
Right.
resume or
Yeah, and
Okay.
that's been tough, like managing interviews through like Zoom calls or just video chats in general. And I'm used to the normal process of, hey, come in and meet with us at 10 o'clock. They show up, you have an interview, something like this, right, in
Right.
person. And so it's been a lot more challenging trying to follow up with people and keep tabs on people. But luckily, like we just try and stay as persistent as we can. And I think most people are pretty tech savvy, that they have LinkedIn, they have an email address, they have somewhat of a smartphone device that they can be available. At Nexio, we try and reach out to people through email. We have texting services so we'll probably bug people 4 or 5 times before they actually try and get rid of us. But it has been challenging trying to get people to stay committed to jobs. And I think a lot of the time with the unemployment changes, which has been great for a lot of people who are without work,
Right.
but I think that's been challenging, another kind of hurdle to overcome, as people are not as inclined to get back to work as quick. And I can't say that I wouldn't blame some of them.
Because they're making as much money on
Right.
unemployment.
Yeah, or more.
Yeah, I had a
Yeah.
couple of
Some
friends
cases.
who we had a couple of great positions, and I said, hey, come work with us, like I can get you a job. It's like, I'm golfing every day, man.
Oh.
So anyway, it's one of those things, but again, I think it goes back to the job that you want versus the job that you need. Because
Right.
I've talked to some people who have been in VP level roles and they're just looking for something to get by. We just hired someone today who took a temporary 8-week assignment just because he needed to. right? And so I think that's kind of the benefit of a staffing company and really expanding your resources a
Right.
little bit there.
So those references really do play a big role, probably for work ethic and follow through and all of those good things
Yeah.
on a social platform.
Yeah, of course.
Awesome.
Mhm.
Okay.
I like in your notes, it says keep learning and don't sell
was just
yourself
thinking
short.
that.
Yeah.
Tell us more about that
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah, and I think, I think a lot of times I think kind of the stereotype with staffing companies is that it's just a temp job or they're not really long-term opportunities. And I think maybe I, going back to the job that you want versus the job that you need, like don't just take a job because you need one. I was listening to a podcast, it's called How I Built This. If you haven't listened to it, it's really good. They just interview a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of successful people who have really just gone through these challenging things and been very successful. And I think the podcast I listened to was with Ring.com, the gentleman that invented that. And it was just an interesting story that he wasn't really trying to invent the doorbell camera, he was trying to invent something else, and he just needed a doorbell camera to see his front door while he was tinkering in the garage, right? And so it's pretty interesting actually. But he talked a lot about, his wife would always tell him it's just the season of life, like going bankrupt or putting in like leveraging the mortgage on your house, like that's just the season of life. And so I think when I put that on my notes, it's just a season, like COVID hopefully will pass or employment will get back to somewhat of a normal thing. And so I think a lot of people have to just realize and be okay with that. This is just the season of life. It's just a time in your life, and you can either use COVID as an excuse to kind of stay where you're at, or you can use it as kind of a stepping stool to get to somewhere better, hopefully on the other side of it.
I love that.
I do
and
too.
oftentimes those temporary jobs can become permanent.
Yeah.
That happens
Yeah.
a lot.
Yeah, and we've had, at Nextio, we do a little bit of everything. We have temporary assignments that are 6 to 8 weeks. We have temp to hire jobs where if you're working with an organization long enough, then they would offer you a full-time position. But we also help companies transition directly from us to the company. So you're not really working with Nextio, we're just kind of facilitating the
Right,
process.
right.
So I think if you do your homework as a candidate, if you really reach out to people, if you can become friends with a recruiter or a talent acquisition person, that's probably going to be your best friend as a professional. I've had a lot of people that I've worked with said, man, I sure love that I know a recruiter. Because I'll have people all the time like, do you have any jobs on this? You know any jobs about that? And so,
Yeah.
and I'm just wired to I just like to search and just send people hundreds of
Oh,
links to
awesome,
apply.
Taylor.
And so it's been fun, but I think it's been challenging as well because people are trying to find that perfect fit, but they're scrambling because it's just a different time right now.
Well, it sounds
So
like you're a perfect
enlightening.
fit.
Thank you
He is.
so
He's so
much.
good at what he does.
Very good.
Thanks
Yeah.
for coming.
Thanks
Of
so
course,
much.
yeah, it was fun.
Check out his podcast too.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, I have an interview coming up with another guy. His name's Joey Price. So hopefully that'll happen soon. But yeah, I interviewed Scott Miller a couple weeks ago
Oh,
from,
really?
from Franklin Covey. He's their VP
Yeah.
of like thought leadership, and that was actually pretty good. But he said one thing. Sorry if I maybe take a couple more seconds. But he mentioned something to me that I think will stick, and I've mentioned it to my brother-in-law about playing football. But he always mentioned that he encourages his team to make new mistakes. And he mentioned that it's okay to make mistakes, it's okay to fail, but don't make the same mistake twice. So as long as you're failing, you're learning from it and doing something different. And I think it applies in a situation like this of,
Right.
revamp your LinkedIn. If it doesn't work, then you figure out what happened and you do it better the next time. So yeah, I appreciate you all having me on. This has been
Thanks,
fun,
Taylor.
and I'm glad that I can
Great.
hopefully come back.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank
much.
you.
Coming up next, we'll talk about the Parade of Homes. Stay with us for more studio chatter.